Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. In this episode, we're joined by Connell Gauld to talk about augmented reality. Connell is a co-founder of Zapper and leads a platform team overseeing many of the technical aspects of the business, including app development, server infrastructure, statistics, the collection and analysis of analytics, and the in-house and consumer tooling. So pretty much everything by the sounds of it. Welcome to the Cynical Developer.
Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. So sounds like you've got a lot on your plate there.
Yeah, it is a lot to do, a big job, but I'm supported by a fantastic team who handle lots of the nitty-gritty bits of all of that. So it's basically just about keeping all the plates spinning from my perspective, and trying to continue to do some development work myself where I can as well.
Yeah, that's a very hard thing to keep the balance between is that management and business running side of your roles, and then trying to keep your hand in as a developer. I was a team lead solutions architect for a while, and I moved away from hands-on coding, and I did miss that. And it was a real effort to actually get back and do some coding. It was something I had to consciously make an effort to do. And in the end, I took a step down and went back to being a developer.
Yeah, and I think it's one of these things as well where it's a bit like having a baby, and you work on something, you develop it for a while, and then it becomes time for you to hand it over to somebody else, and you just have to be not precious about it, I think, and document it well, hand it over, help somebody else understand it, and be happy with the fact that you're not going to be the one that's writing every line of code anymore. But it is nice to get involved in it, solve some proper engineering problems every now and again. I mean, certainly at my heart, I'm an engineer and I want to be doing this. And with Zapper, I'm the CTO, so I look after it from a kind of top level and an architectural level, but that's only because of the circumstance that's put me there. I think at the end of the day, I'm an engineer, and that's first and foremost in my mind when I'm working on stuff.
Yeah. I think there's a whole nother episode possibly in that, because I'm a big advocate of the don't be precious about the code that you write, because at the end of the day, it's for the business. It's not really your code. Because I've been there. I've been the one that's been precious about my code. And I think you get to a level of maturity in your role or in your career, and you're like, well, if it's not right, it's not right. Change it. I really couldn't care less if it's wrong. Maybe not quite the right terms. I do care that it's wrong and that I did it wrong, but I'm not going to be upset that you went in and fixed it and made it right.
Yeah, indeed. And sometimes, you've just got to kind of ship it and see what happens. Like you can be you can spend a lot of time getting something absolutely perfect, but if it's too late by a week, then it's too late by a year. And you obviously, you don't want to poison the market by putting something out that is not working at all. But I think it's important that, you put something together, you make it interesting, and then you get it out there, even if it's not perfect. And then, if you've got clients that are paying you lots of money, then you can make it perfect because you'll have more resources at your hands. But until then, build it, see what other people do with it, because they're going to have more interesting ideas than you are about how it can be used often.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a saying that's unfortunately not podcast friendly, but I can edit it down to commit it, F it, ship it, revert it. And that's something I always sort of push to the teams that I work with. It's like, good enough is good enough. Don't work on it too much. Let's get it out there. Let's see if it actually does the job. But we're not here to talk about work practices and work ethics and obscene sayings that I may or may not have come up with. We're here to talk about augmented reality. Now, previously we've had Ed Yao on talking about virtual reality. And we've also spoken about the HoloLens as well previously. So they were a couple of years ago now, so it'd be very interesting to find out what has changed. But for those that are listening that don't know what augmented reality is, could you give us a quick overview?
Absolutely. And it's maybe worth starting with virtual reality, actually, because virtual reality is a concept that we've kind of had in sci-fi and in people's imaginations, and it's been on like Tomorrow's World in the 90s, that kind of future-looking television program. And so with virtual reality, we know that it gives you an environment that's computer generated, so a 3D virtual environment that replaces your actual environment and puts you somewhere else. So be that a game that you might play where you're exploring some vast planet or something like that. What augmented reality does is combine the concepts from virtual reality, so virtual content that's been generated by a computer, and it combines that with your real physical, real world environment. And it typically will do that by showing you the environment you're in. So if you're in an office, for example, you'll be taking part in an augmented reality experience and you will see the office you're in. But into that environment, you will see virtual content placed like it's actually there in the office with you. And so there are lots of cases of this where we actually used it, but maybe don't even realize it's augmented reality. One really popular one is face filters that you might get on Snapchat or Instagram or these types of social media tools, where it will show you the selfie camera of your phone, so you see yourself, and then it will apply virtual content to your face or around you that's obviously not really on your face, but when you look at the screen of your phone, it appears it's there. So that's augmented reality. It's taking your real world face and adding virtual content.
Sure. So you talked about Tomorrow's World in the 90s. That was always a program I loved to watch. For those listeners that aren't in the UK, tough. Maybe go and have a look on YouTube. You may be able to find it. But it was a show that talked about the things that were coming in the near future. One that always stands out to me was they had a saltwater driven car. So it was driven through osmosis that generated the electric. And I think it was being made by Vauxhall at the time. And that never appeared. They had the prototype, but nothing ever came of it. And I can't find any reference to it online as well. So conspiracy theories there and tinfoil hats on. But keeping on that 90s TV program, now my father was a Trekkie. Still is to some degree. It's not something that really floats my boat too much, but I know a lot about it because I was forced to watch it. Now they have the holodeck. Would that fall into augmented reality or virtual reality?
That's a really interesting question. And without wanting to get too geeky about it, I think that the way that the holodeck works is I'm already doubting my answer here. So the holodeck, as far as I can tell, produces physical objects in your space. So if I am in the holodeck, I can touch an object, I can pick it up, I can move it around the room. I suppose it's augmented reality in a way because that content wouldn't be there otherwise. But I think it really is on that blurring edge between what actually is real reality. You know, if you're in the holodeck and you're holding a cup, you're holding a real cup, even if it's a facsimile somehow of a real cup. It's a really interesting a concept. I suspect actually that it's maybe even closer to virtual reality, where actually your complete environment, when you go into the holodeck, you don't see any of the ship. You're completely replaced with some landscape with a beautiful sunrise somewhere that's replacing your entire understanding of your environment, rather than just adding to the environment that you would otherwise be having on the ship.
Yeah. I suppose. Well, I was going to reference another program then, but due to the international audience, they probably won't get it. But I was going to talk about Rimmer from Red Dwarf. That he's a holographic projection that in later series can leave the ship and walk around, and then in later series again they manage to get a thing called hard light, which I think that sort of blurs those lines with the holodeck. It's a very similar theory, similar idea, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can you can really, this kind of concept of what's real and not real, you can pick up and you can run really quite far with. Because I suppose things like the Matrix, where people are tapped in right into their spinal cord and are having some experience injected directly into their brain. To what extent is that a virtual reality experience?
Yeah.
It's eventually, I suppose, you end up with this sort of philosophy of science point of that or we think what's real is what we perceive, and that if something appears to be real to our senses, what's to say it's not real, even if it's being generated by a computer?
Yeah, I was thinking of the Matrix, but a different part of it. Actually, so I was thinking about the third film where Neo makes it to the robot city and he's lost his sight, but he can see everything
Mm.
from that digital point of view. It's sort of where the Matrix sort of loses its plot a little bit. But that, I guess, is similar to augmented reality, because that's being projected over the top of what is physically there. But unfortunately, he can't see what is physically there.
Yeah, indeed. I think sci-fi is such an interesting place to look for inspiration in terms of the technology that we have now, and how we can use the technology we have now. Um, I'm sure there are people using virtual reality and augmented reality in terms of helping restore sense to people. Like, I suppose it's being used in the Matrix there, where
Yep.
you have someone that isn't able to use as much of the visual sense that they would ordinarily have, but by using computer generated information, you can make that clearer to them, or help them carry out certain tasks.
Yeah, it is great, and I know that a lot of the technologies, a lot is probably an overstatement, but some of the technologies we have today are thanks to programs like Star Trek, where people looked at that and said, "I wonder if that's possible." And like the most famous one is the sliding doors on the deck.
Yeah.
That in the very first series, that they were two guys pulling the doors open with ropes, and the doors, I believe, that we have now that automatically open, they came about because people wanted those doors that automatically opened like that. So it's the way technology gets driven by popular culture with things like that is really, really interesting.
Hmm.
But so the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality is that augmented reality, you can see what's around you in the current interpretation of it, whereas virtual reality is completely, the whole environment that you're looking at is non-existent.
Exactly. And it kind of stems, I suppose that's where the augmented word comes from. So if you augment something, you add to it, you add function to it, or you add utility to it in some way that still retains its original thing, but has this new power, if you like. And so that's where augmented reality is different. It's taking something that already exists, which is your environment, and it's bringing extra content to that. It allows you to do something new, or have an experience that you wouldn't otherwise be able to have in that environment.
Sure. So Um, we spoke to Lars Klint about the HoloLens, and that is a device that I've wanted since it came out, but never really got around to buying one. It would just be one of those gadgets I bought, and it sits on the desk, very much like my virtual reality helmet. That is one way, I guess, to use augmented reality. Is that the only way that somebody can use it? Do they have to have a big, bulky, expensive headset?
Absolutely not. And I think the thing that's tricky with augmented reality is that it's actually quite a broad definition. It's a conceptual definition about your environment or your world, and the types of content that could be added to it. And so there are quite a lot of ways in which that's implemented. And absolutely, the HoloLens, for example, is one where you have a headset that you place on your head, much like you would a VR headset. But instead of it completely occluding your view of the world, you can see through the headset into your immediate environment. And there are lenses that sit in front of your eyes that will add content into that environment. And in order to facilitate that, the HoloLens has got a ton of cameras around it and lots of sensors, so that the HoloLens can know where in your environment you are, in order to be able to add that content into the environment so it feels like it's sitting in the right place. Now, there are lots of those sensors that are present in the HoloLens that are also present in other devices. So, for example, at Zapper, where I work, we use the mobile phone that you have in your pocket in order to be able to provide augmented reality experiences. So we use the screen on the front of your phone. We use the camera that's built in, either front facing or rear facing, in order to capture camera images. We take those camera images and we draw them on the screen of your phone so that you can see what's being captured, as if you were going to take a photo of something. Then we use computer vision techniques. So we analyze those camera frames that we get from the camera in order to understand the structure of those frames and where you are in relation to the environment around you. And we add in information from the sensors in your phone, the gyroscope, the accelerometer that knows which way up the phone is. And we take all of that, we take content from the web that you might want to view, we join that all together into an experience that takes place on the screen of the phone. So in lots of these cases, we're doing similar concepts. We've got cameras, we've got orientation sensors, we've got screens, we've got GPUs for rendering 3D content. But the form factors vary very significantly. With the phone that I've got in my hand, I'm going to get a less immersive experience because what I see only takes up a small portion of my visual field, if you like, because my phone screen's relatively small. But it's also an experience that is more contextually lightweight for me. So I can take my phone out of my pocket and I can have that experience without having to sit down and get a bulky headset and put it on my head and commit to a bigger experience or a more an experience where I've got to invest more of my time in the setup and therefore hopefully get more in return. So there's a spectrum, if you like, of different user experiences that are possible depending on how much of your time and finance. I mean, the HoloLens is an expensive device, for example, whereas the phone you have in your pocket is a sunk cost that you've already paid for. So it's a spectrum
Sure.
of different options.
Yeah. So most people, unless you've been living under a rock for several years, will have heard of Pokemon Go, or more recently Jurassic Park Alive, I think it's called. They may have used, as we talked about, those filters, where they change your face, put a giant turtle in your bath, or something like that. And they're all game aspects. And virtual reality, from my experiences, has been great for games. Arizona Sunshine is probably one of the best games I've ever played for virtual reality, to the point where I was panicking and really sort of flighty about zombies coming after me, and was very gutted when it finished. But again, virtual reality seems to lend itself very well to games, but I'm yet to see a compelling offering for a real world, maybe business application. Are there any real world applications of augmented reality that they're actually something that you would do? Because a lot of the things that you look at, you go, yeah, okay, we can walk around the car, but that's a bit of a gimmick because over there in the showroom, I can see the car in the
Yeah,
physical form.
absolutely. And I think that's a struggle that augmented reality has, is that it's cool. and and so the types of experiences that people have built with augmented reality, especially in the early days, have been ones where it's been to demonstrate the coolness of it. It's like, oh, look what I've been able to make or do, and so consequently have been quite experience led, quite short form, quite often marketing related, where the value to the end user isn't always apparent. And from our perspective at Zapper, we know that, for example, within marketing, augmented reality works really well. It engages users in ways that are just not possible with normal online media or visual, like video form media, for example. We know that it is better for attention and better for the laying down of memories and these sorts of things, because it's so visual and it's kind of geometric. People are interacting in an experience where it's 3D and they're moving around. So it's very engaging from that perspective. And so that works really well for marketing. And I think there are lots of valid use cases within marketing, even if each individual one seems like a small benefit. So, for example, if I have a movie poster and I scan that movie poster and I can see some trailer information, maybe there's a gameplay experience that I can have that takes place on that poster. Whilst that in of itself is not the killer app for augmented reality, if you take the class of experiences that encompass gamified, physically located marketing and advertising, that's quite a big use case for augmented reality as a whole. But there are so many other use cases where it actually adds a lot of benefit. And some cases where it's augmented reality and we've never really thought about it as being augmented reality. So, for example, in planes, the heads-up displays that sit in front of pilots that show them the kind of attitude of the plane versus the real-world horizon that they see in front of them, that's an augmented reality interface. So the horizon that's rendered by that kind of screen in front of them is augmented content, and then the real world horizon behind them is the real world environment. So even in lots of these places, we have augmented reality. But in terms of the types of more experiential AR that Zapper, for example, is involved in, there's huge use cases in learning and development where either in the classroom, it's a way for bringing richer materials to textbooks or to the learning environment where a pupil will already be wanting to have a device in their hand because that's where they're used to getting their most rich sort of sensory input from, where you can link that with the types of material that they're supposed to be learning about can be very powerful, all the way through to how do businesses communicate policies to their employees across the world in ways that are engaging, or perhaps there are training concepts that have to be delivered to users where there's 3D concepts involved. So you're absolutely right about the car. We can have a showroom where we can see the car in AR, or we can go through and we can see the car in a real setting. But what we can't do when we're in the showroom is look at what the inside of the engine looks like, or what does the underside of the car look like, or what was the manufacturing process that took place to make the car. So there are always additional dimensions or aspects that you can bring where augmented reality is kind of unique in being able to do so. And they're often related to 3D space and interaction in an in-depth way, and merging digital content with what would otherwise be a purely flat or physical or static medium.
Yeah. So we talked about HoloLens quite a bit. Now that is a dedicated piece of hardware that runs probably dedicated software that needs specialist skills to integrate with. The likes of Pokemon Go and Jurassic Park Live and all those sort of things, they use, I believe, something called I think it's web AR or something to those terms. Is that right? Are you able to sort of go into that a little bit more?
Well, yeah. So certainly, I suppose web AR is a particular concept which is using or delivering augmented reality types experiences in the web browser. So in the past, thus far, if you want to access the camera or the device sensors that you'll have in a mobile device, for example, you have to build an app. So, for example, Snapchat has its face filters, and the reason Snapchat have been able to do that thus far is because it's part of the Snapchat app that's installed on your phone and gets all that great access to the camera. It gets full access to the CPU that's running on that device so that it can do all the complex computations needed to process those camera images and those sensor inputs. What WebAR is a move away from apps. It says, actually, web browsers provide us with enough access to the camera, with enough access to those sensors, and also with enough access to fast performing computation that we can, instead of requiring a user to download an app to take part in these experiences, we can deliver it in their web browser as if it was another web page. And it's a really important step, I think, for augmented reality, because the last thing you want to ask somebody to do is to download an app every time they see a movie poster, or every time they open their textbook, they have to download another app to view the content for a particular chapter. The the types of experiences that augmented reality is good at delivering are ones where the user is going to be holding their phone in their hand. They're going to have just encountered something. They're going to want to access that content straight away before they want to move on to the next chapter, or they're going to get on their bus. And the web is uniquely placed to be able to deliver content to users like that, because they scan the QR code and they're onto the web page, and that content is downloaded and takes place on their device straight away, rather than them having to go to the App Store and search for an app and then install it and wait for it to install, etc. So WebAR is I suppose, it's not a specific technology. It's the concept of delivering augmented reality through the medium of web and web pages.
Right. Okay. So I guess at this current stage, I don't know how mature it is. Are there a lot of barriers on that because of different browsers supporting it and not supporting it?
I'd say yes, broadly, although the picture today is a lot better than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And the reason is that the technology that's delivered through the browsers has evolved a lot in that time, partly through the drive for rich experiences like augmented reality, but really, I'm sure a lot of the reason is video conferencing and the desire to take camera images on web pages in order to let people take part in meetings, for want of a better example. It's driven the ability to process camera frames in the browser quickly, to get camera frames from the camera in the browser. We have a whole set of other technologies, or another specification, if you like, called WebAssembly, which is the ability to run computation in web pages in a different way than has been possible before. So you may know that when you visit a web page in your web browser, up until now, you've been able to access pages which are quite dynamic and rich. And if you use Gmail, for example, it has a rich interface where you can visit different areas of the page. It does spell correction, all of these things, and it can do these dynamic user interactions because of JavaScript, which is a core scripting language in the web browser. So if you're a web developer, you will be writing JavaScript that makes the web pages that your users visit work as they're supposed to. But there's a new technology that's available called WebAssembly that gives you much lower level access to the CPU on devices so that you can run computation a lot faster. And you can also take algorithms that weren't written for JavaScript. So you can take algorithms that were written for other programming languages, perhaps without the browser being the intended distribution mechanism, and you can make them work in the web browser. And so it's these types of technologies that have arrived in the browser and make it possible in the last couple of years to really be pushing through this quantity and quality of computation that's necessary for things like augmented reality.
Yeah, we had an episode with Guy Royce about WebAssembly, episode 122. So if anybody wants to deep dive into that a little bit more, they can jump back there. We talk about WASM and Blazor and board games and all sorts done with WebAssembly. It's pretty powerful stuff. It really is. Guy is phenomenal with that sort of stuff. You talked there about the mobile device looking at a movie poster and it loading up the augmented reality. Now that would be fantastic. I always felt that QR codes didn't take off because an iPhone, if you show that a QR code with your camera, it will scan it and go to the web page. Every single Android device I've ever owned, you have to download a separate application and open a specific QR code app to be able to read that QR code. Whether it's just the devices I bought, I don't know. But I think that would be the killer turning point for that augmented reality, that you scan that code or what have you on the poster with your phone, and straight away it downloads a small package and goes boom, there you go, there's your augmented reality. There's Keanu Reeves and doing his Bill and Ted remake right in front of you on the poster, and it would be great.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about QR, specifically around Android. So for example, there's Google Lens, which if you buy a phone that's got the Google provided camera app, then Google Lens is integrated, but there's a hidden little button that appears if you want to activate that mode, and you've got to press that button at the right time in order to get into QR scanning mode. And I think that's a big barrier to to QR taking off, because in order for you to be able to take the Bill and Ted film, for example, you're kind of talking to your Gen Z audience already, an audience that's
Yep.
tech savvy. But if you're making a cookery book, for example, where you want video content related to each recipe, then asking a user who is going to be cooking something, they could be 18, they could be 80. It's really difficult to present a QR code to somebody within that target audience range and know that they'll be able to scan it. And so one of the things one of the technologies we have is the ability to scan QR codes from within a web page. So the QR code is presented. Next to the QR code, there's a really short URL that's just like scan.me. It's not scan.me. I don't know who owns that. But it's like a short URL, so that if the user knows how to deal with the QR code, they just scan the QR code. If they recognize the web address, they type the web address in, and then that web address will scan the QR code for them. And so it's just trying to think about clever ways to anticipate a given user experience from the point of view of these different target users, if you like, and trying to smooth out any sort of friction in the experience as much as you can.
Sure. I think as developers, we often get lost in the barrier to entry for a developer. What's the technical problems? How hard is it to use for us as technical people? How hard is it for us to implement? I think it often gets left by the wayside of how hard is this for someone to actually use? So like the QR scanning thing, I've had many conversations with clients of varying technical ability when they've had to do a certain thing with a certain device, and every single device does that certain task in a million different ways, and it's always tough. So finding that unified, easy access way is definitely the way forward.
It's interesting because I think that in some ways the odds are stacked against us as developers because we're necessarily very technically capable, partly because the tools we use to make these experiences are difficult to use themselves. A programming language is a tough user experience. You've got to learn the syntax, you've got to learn the APIs, you've got to learn how to compile everything. That is, as a user experience, if you were to design a user experience that's for somebody to learn a programming language for the first time, you'd end up with a programming language like Scratch or these toy languages that are used by kids to learn programming, and you wouldn't end up with something that allowed you to build the next big app or what have you. And in part that's a failure of the actual programming languages and tools and IDEs we have, but it's maybe a necessary evil. But what it does is it conditions us as developers to be used to the fact that we've got to learn how to use a user interface in order to be productive with it, or it at least numbs us to the fact that simple user interfaces are going to be easier to understand for people that aren't as used to these technical experiences.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked about the barrier to entry for users, and I mentioned that the barrier to entry for developers. Now, is there a steep learning curve for developers to start using something like Web AR?
It depends. There's a huge variety of different possibilities. It's a bit like if you were to make a computer game. So at some end, you have game editor type programs that are really easy to use that will let you build perhaps 2D games or simple logic games like tic-tac-toe or that sort of thing. So simple to pick up and understand and use, but also relatively constrained in the types of things you can achieve with them. And then you scale all the way to the other end where you have proper IDE development environments with 3D and scripting and these sorts of things where you can achieve a lot more. You can achieve pretty much whatever you can imagine, and that's technically possible, but it's there for you to do. But in order to do so, you've got to be considerably more investing of your time in understanding and learning how it works. And certainly in our business, our strategy is to try and cater for a few of the different user technical levels, if you like, across that spectrum. So we want to have products that are super simple to use, that work well for very specific types of experience. So, for example, we have a tool called Designer, And the purpose of it is to help people bring print material to life. So let's say you're publishing a magazine and you have 30 pages in your magazine showing off different pieces of clothing or what have you. And then perhaps you want to bring each to life with a video of a model moving in that item of clothing and a button to take you to an e-commerce shop so you can purchase it. Our designer tool is specifically designed to make it easy for you to do that. So it feels a bit like PowerPoint. You have different scenes for these different pages. You have different buttons for these different calls to action, if you like, links out to websites, and you can drag in your video and what have you. But it's not going to let you build Pokemon Go. It's going to do well at the particular thing that it's there to do, and it's going to help you do it, even if you aren't so technically minded. And then at the other end of the scale, we have a tool, in fact, so one we've just released called Universal AR, which is a set of SDKs. So, specifically libraries for developers to use where they're going to be coding, they're going to be programming, and those SDKs let them track content from a face, and we'll be able to tell them where a face is in camera images, but then it's up to the developer to render the content on that they want. And so there's a huge spectrum from us, but also in the marketplace in general for where these tools sit and at which technical competencies they sit. Technical competencies is maybe not quite the right word. It's just technical desire almost. There will be people who don't want to worry about scripting. They have a specific problem in mind that they just want to solve. And then there will be those people who maybe they still have the challenge with the magazine, but they're like, I want to script this because otherwise I'm not going to be feeling like I've got enough control here. It's a spectrum, but in AR we're well fitted out with tools now, and that's a particular mission of ours at Zapper, to make sure that the tools are there for anybody to use, regardless of their technical desires.
Okay, yeah. Having spoken to you today about this topic, it's actually given me a brilliant idea. Before the current situation that we're not allowed to talk about on podcasts, in case one of the providers detects it and takes us down, so we can't talk about it or name it in any sort of which way. I was in talks with a client, very early talks, about a 3D product design application on a website. So a little bit like IKEA had or still have the ability to customize furniture in their browser. We were going to produce something where you could build their product and customize their product and see it in 3D in the browser. But this is sort of taking it to the next level with this web AR. I could maybe even have it, because I did a prototype which did a 3D item in 3D space, but in the browser. But this could take it to the next level where you could actually place that item in the area of your home or facility or wherever it is you're placing it, and see what it looked like. See if it was manageable. Was there really the space for it? Because if anyone out there listening is like me, you measure again, you buy something and you go, oh, that's what 3 foot looks like. It's not what I thought it was. There's not enough room. So I think it'd give that extra space. So I think there's definitely something there for me to look into. But if any of the listeners are looking to get involved with web AR and maybe pick up your products, are these open source? Are they free, or is there a cost to using them?
There's a hobbyist plan which is free to use, so you can go on and use the tools for non-commercial purposes as much as you like. We do have then paid plans for business use, and there are definitely elements of our technology that we plan to open source, although the core computer vision technology is the moneymaker for us, if you like. So it will be not open sourced purely because we wish to continue investing in developing this technology. But you can go onto our website, zap.works, which is our kind of creative tool set. You can get started with the hobbyist plan and get going. I think one of the really interesting things about the example you've just talked about, where you have product visualization, for example, even there, the breadth of opportunity for that type of technology is really, really wide. You have your IKEA or your business that's looking to help their customers visualize, if you like, the space and the product as part of a sales process, if you like. But then you also have 3D modelers who are wanting to demonstrate the 3D models that they've produced to their communities, or they are it's part of the learning process where they are sharing with their fellow pupils in terms of the content that they're producing. So even just 3D visualization is in fact itself a huge market with lots of different users, lots of different use cases. So at the end of the day, I think augmented reality is a user interface. It's a way of interacting with a computer in the same way that in a web browser, it's a user interface that lets you access a wide range of different types of content and use cases. It's exactly the same with augmented reality. And so there's, I don't think, going to be a single killer app for augmented reality in the same way there's not a single killer app for a web browser. It's the beauty of it is in its breadth of use, and having people able to access those tools mean that we get to see every day lots of different use cases that we would have never anticipated otherwise.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting. I think one thing I should point out there is that I mentioned IKEA and then I said a client. I'd like to point out my client was not IKEA, just in case anybody thinks it was, and in case IKEA are listening and they come back and go, whoa, we're not working with you on anything. Why are you saying that?
It's okay. We can talk about the generic Swedish furniture store.
Yeah, definitely not the blue and yellow one. So it sounds like things have come on massively in the 2 years since we previously spoke on this show about augmented reality. What do you think is in the near future for augmented reality? What things could we look forward to seeing? And hopefully, it's more than just Pokemon running around in our front room.
Yeah, I think the important technical step that we have just as a technology sector we've just got beyond is making this available in the web browser. And so what that means is we can start seeing these types of technologies deployed in places where we would not have been able to see it before. So circumstances where users are going to encounter a given experience and take part in it and then discard it very quickly, or where they are running on devices that are otherwise locked down and not able to access app stores, or perhaps it's going to be part of e-commerce, as you say, where you could be scrolling through products on a website and all of a sudden preview them. I think what's next for the marketplace is an explosion of use cases that are facilitated by the fact that the previous barriers and friction in terms of users accessing these experiences are falling away. And we see some of this already with something like Snapchat. So Snapchat has taken face filters, and I don't know how long we've had face filters in Snapchat, maybe 2 years now, something around that amount of time, maybe more. And in that time, Snapchat has gone from having no augmented reality or limited augmented reality to being one of the biggest augmented reality platforms in the world, because they have presented it to users in a way where they don't even know or realize that it's augmented reality. It's just a use case that's talking very specifically to them, that they like, that allows them to express themselves in new ways. And of course, it serves Snapchat well because they deliver programmatic advertising through this channel. Now, what the web means in these cases is we have the same level of access to users. So users are able to get to these experiences quickly. Before, with Snapchat, they can get to it because they already had Snapchat on their device. It's a hugely popular app. But now anybody can target these users. Everybody has a web browser on their phone. You don't have to convince somebody to install it. So the huge numbers of available users are there for you. And now you can deliver the types of experiences that could be delivered in Snapchat or on your generic furniture store website or any of these places. You can deliver that type of experience. And I think that's going to be huge. You can do it without having to worry about partnering with a social network, for example. So with Snapchat, you have all of these GDPR questions, and you have is my target user a member of the Snapchat community or not? Everybody's got a browser, not to repeat myself too often. So the opportunities are much greater. And so in terms of the technology, we'll see more computer vision technologies delivered through the browser. We'll see faster performance. We'll see more features in terms of the types of content you can render. But really the big difference is that it will be accessible to whomever you wish to target.
Yeah. So you heard it here first. You'll soon be able to not only listen to the Cynical Developer, but view it through your web browser in an augmented reality experience where you could see the guest and myself talking in front of you, maybe.
I have a face for radio, so it's all good.
Yeah, makes two of us. Although I have made the jump over to YouTube for another venture, but we'll not go into that on the show. I don't like to try and mix too much my many different obsessions.
Everyone loves a bit of cross promotion. I'm sure it's okay.
Oh yeah, they do. But not today. Especially after I spoke earlier in the month about the fact that I don't talk about or do cross promotion of irrelevant content. I'd be contradicting myself. But yeah, that sort of wraps things up for us for this evening. So thank you for coming on and talking to us about augmented reality. It's actually really changed my perspective on what's in the art of possible.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a lovely chat. I've enjoyed it.
Good. And I'd just like to thank everyone out there for listening. I'm James Sluddart, and you've been listening to Connell Gauld talking about augmented reality. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website where you can find all the resource links, show notes for each episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, and help the Cynical Developer to reach more developers around the globe.